Alright, hello, and time for another IncusOS live stream. This one I think has been quite long awaited to an extent, because I've talked about it a few times, and we were actually hoping to get something done for the Incus 6.16 release, and it didn't really happen. But basically, the goal for this live stream is gonna be to put in place an install CLI for IncusOS. That's gonna be in the Incus code base itself. So I'm looking at adding Incus admin OS and then some commands to the Incus code base. So even though it's effectively an Incus OS live stream, we're going to be mostly working within the Incus code base instead today. Now, just as usual, let's do a quick recap of where we're at with Incus OS, especially because there's been an Incus release last week. Which means we're now kind of 2 weeks since the last one of those live streams. So 2 weeks ago, that puts us to the 21st. So let's see what happened since the 21st on there. It's 26th, not quite there yet. 2 weeks ago, what was 2 weeks ago? 21st, okay, now about. So the last live stream was the addition of the applications API. So you can see the final pull request there doing that got merged. And then we did a few more tweaks around handling of install media. There's a few more of those still, just trying to improve the way we keep track of disks, whether it's the install media, whether it's the different disks on the system itself. I'm sure a bunch of you have noticed the expiry of the Zabli repo signing key, so we had to update our copy as well to the new key, since we use the Zabli packages for both, for actually all three of kernel, ZFS, and Incus. So just updated that. Added some extra logic for handling low disk space. We've done that kind of across IncusOS, Migration Manager, and Operation Center, where we want to make sure that systems are not likely to run out of disk space, given that there's no local terminal or anything to really go and fix things. We want to make sure that IncusOS can boot with a completely filled drive, that it has logic to detect that it's running out of space, and then go and do some obvious cleanup, like the systemd journal and that kind of stuff. It's not very likely to happen because we require at least 50 gigs for the OS partition, and we only store a few hundreds of kilobytes of stuff on disk. So something would need to go terribly, terribly wrong to really use all of the space. The most likely would be the systemd journal kind of growing out of like at a crazy rate and using all the space. But the systemd journal also has a bunch of built-in logic to rotate and flush files as the disk gets full. So not terribly likely, but we still did some work around that. Fixed some kind of handling of pending updates and the warnings being shown for that. Cleaned up, so there was logic for carrying the swap encryption keys over multiple releases. That's now been part of IncusOS for at least a couple of months. So we removed the migration logic, since basically anyone using IncusOS would already have had the fix for a while. Then we added a recovery mode effectively to IncusOS that supports two different things. So effectively, you attach an extra media, so it could be like a CD-ROM drive, it could be a USB stick or something like that. We're looking for a specific partition label, and then we mount that partition, and within that partition, we're looking for either a update folder with an update that needs to be applied. So you do that if there's some internet connectivity issue or something with the version you're running and with the previous version available on the system. You could use a USB stick with a copy of the latest update, and then effectively have IncusOS in recovery mode apply it for you in reboot. It can also run a shell script. That shell script needs to be signed by the same key that signs updates. So it's not opening the doors for anyone to just like write their shell script, put it on the recovery media, reboot, and then it will run. You still won't be able to do that. But if something goes wrong and we need to fix it for a lot of users, we can make a script available, a hotfix script available that is signed by us. And then that can be put on a media like that machine is rebooted, that executes the fix, and then you get back online. So anyway, we've added those mechanisms. And so that was probably the rest of that PR. Yeah, and also made sure that the recovery stuff runs before the networking goes up, since networking is the most likely step to be potentially broken and causing people having issues to fix it. So we're making sure we run recovery before that. Which one was this one? Yeah, we added a new update API. So there's like /system/updates now that lets you tweak when to look for updates, so like the frequency at which you want to look for updates, whether you want the system to automatically reboot for OS updates. Normally you don't want that because you're actually running VMs and containers on there, but you could have it auto reboot. And you can also set maintenance windows during which updates can be applied, and the rest of the time they will just get downloaded and staged but not actually applied. So there's that new API that's been added. Some tweaks as well to system extension signature. There's some weird issue with systemd where it will always prompt for the password key if the system extension layer is not signed correctly, which is a bit of a problem if someone somehow was mixing either mixing system extensions somehow that would potentially deadlock IncusOS, the IncusOS daemon. So we want to avoid that. There's also a risk of when we do key transition, like we're gonna change keys every year. When we do a key transition, a system could get in a situation where it can't it can't validate a new application because it hasn't yet updated its OS to the new version. So we've added some logic now to detect who signed what so that we don't risk jamming the system effectively, and we can detect that ahead of time. There's a system debug open, they will probably fix it, and that's gonna get backported and everything, but that takes a little while, so we just added some logic to protect us against that for now. Added a bunch, as I mentioned earlier, a bunch more detection logic around the CD-ROM handling, removed a field that we didn't really use within the network config, specifically around setting a VLAN directly on an interface or bond. We don't really want people to do that anymore. Instead, you should define a VLAN device in the network config and attach it to the parent interface or bond. So we just remove the old syntax to avoid confusion there. A few more tweaks around storage pools. We had, I think, one community member run into issues with a pool that was created, deleted, created again or something. It wasn't importing correctly, so we fixed the logic there to be a bit more reliable. Build environment switched from Bookworm over to Trixie, even though we're always using Debian 13, so Trixie as the base for the image itself. Now the build environment itself is also running on Trixie. Added a small fix to application loading so that the systemd unit gets reloaded before the application is restarted, just in case something changes in the systemd unit. That way it's gonna get applied correctly. The documentation has been updated a bunch to match the current state of things. It's still, like, we'll probably want to actually put in place proper Swagger for the API, put some extra, like probably start using Sphinx for the full OS documentation, all that kind of stuff. But the current documentation markdown have been quite significantly updated, at least to be in sync. Just taking a couple of notes here on the side. All right. And we did a bit of cleanup as well. So I had an issue with a customer deployment where the server was 12 days out of date as far as the system time, which was preventing us from fetching an update because of the TLS certificate validity. And the core of the issue there was we were bringing up the network and then never waiting for NTP to do its network sync. So in that environment, the machine's time got fixed, but after we failed to download the update. So we just did a bit of reshuffling there to make sure that we start the NTP client at the right time and that we give it 30 seconds to try and do an initial sync. Not all environments will allow NTP, so we don't want to fail if it can't, but we at least want to give it a good shot. There was also an issue where NTP was being started before the DNS was configured, which if you're using time servers using a DNS record, which is the default, that was a bit of an issue, so we fixed that. All right, and that's where we're at right now. So I do have an IncusOS system running. I won't go through the whole install and everything again in this live stream because it's not really needed. So just to show IncusOS VGA, here we go. So that's a VM that's running IncusOS, nothing fancy, just basic config. It's been initialized and we're good. There's a question from Jared about whether the NTP issue was caused by the default unit start order on Debian. No, it's not. We effectively bypass most of that because IncusOSD is the one that generates the network D config and then starts network D, timesync D, resolve D in the right order. And the order we were starting it on was not correct. So we were effectively generating the network D config, starting network D, starting timesync D, starting resolve D. I think that's basically what was going on and obviously not correct. So yeah, we're effectively in charge of that stuff. We don't use many, like most of the system D services are technically disabled within IncusOS and get started by IncusOSD at the right time. So we've got tighter control and on things, and we can make sure that all the drives that need to be unlocked have been unlocked. All the data that needs to be generated from our state has been generated before we start any of those services. That's actually how we keep the OS so tidy. Like if you look at the running system, that's everything that's actually running on the system. So we've got systemd itself. Systemd does start journald on its own. Okay, resolved has been running for a while, so that actually suggests that we don't start it, we just let it run, but we kick it once the network config has changed. So that was probably the race there. udev starts on system boot, dbus starts also on system boot, and then after that we've got IncusOSD, and IncusOSD then starts all of the other pieces. So Prometheus, that gets automatically started by us as soon as we've generated some config. Same thing with login D, that one gets auto started, I think, as soon as we start some specific processes. We don't mess with it, but it gets socket activated, I think. Network D we directly run once we generate the network config. Timesync D we directly run once we've got the network in place and the time config in place. And then that's the actual application. So that's LXCFS for Incus, and then Incus itself, and Incus then starts DNS mask. And that's all that's running on this system. We also clean up a bunch of other things. Like if you look at the timer list, it's also been quite narrowed down. Oh, actually, that's an old install. Newer installs should not have these two. I think we actually nuked them properly now. Temp files we do run for cleanup, and we run the E2FS scrub and fstrim because that's just good for drive maintenance, but everything else is disabled. All right, so that's basically where we're at. I do have that IncusOS deployment as a remote, so you can see it's completely empty. And I can go and throw API queries at it right now. So OS 1.0 system updates. But that's, oops. Yeah, OS 1.0. I'm just checking random stuff. Okay, so that's working. System doesn't listen anything. 1.0 is fine. I think, oh yeah, just push the tag now. So system update doesn't exist yet. That's why. It will exist shortly. System storage, all of those APIs all worked out. There's a question like, were there any big changes with Trixie? Not really. I mean, so as I said, like IncusOS has always been based on Trixie, so that doesn't change anything as far as the image we generate. The only thing we changed is what we use to run the builds on. So if you look at the GitHub workflow, is it this one? Yeah, that's just the job test. But if we look at the build ones, what repo am I in? I'm in Incus, not in IncusOS, that's why. And we go into the IncusOS repo instead. I'm like, that doesn't look right. So yeah, if we look at IncusOS build, here we go, image Debian 13. So we use self-hosted GitHub Action runners to build things because we need nested vert and some other things. And we want a cleaner environment than what GitHub Actions normally provides. And that environment so far had been based on Debian 12, and now we've just bumped it to 13. That didn't, the change itself was nothing effectively. If we look at the commit itself, it's literally 12 to 13, 12 to 13. So there's no change in behavior or anything that needed additional fixes. It was just a case of, well, since we're building a Debian 13 based image, we might as well also build that from a Debian 13 system to just kind of keep things tidier. So we've done it that way. All right. So as mentioned, we do have the API working, and on the CLI front, my plan is to do something kind of like that. So admin.os is going to be the command where we put things under, and then we can do something like admin.os system, and then do show remote. So that's optional. And then service, and we need to support target as an optional thing there. Okay, so that would be one of the commands. So that would be show, and we would probably do edit as well. Then kind of rinse and repeat with some of the other options. So that's the system. Then for applications, we do show for the application itself. And we'd probably put a list command as well. There's no edit currently on applications, so it would just look something like that. Actually, the syntax here is technically wrong. It should be here. Okay, something like this for application. And then again, for services would be kind of a mix between the two, if you wish. So it's effectively applications, but also has edit. And basically all of those should put a warning saying that this CLI is not stable yet, because it's not. But that's basically the idea. Okay. This is not really a service, more like a section for the system stuff. Okay. What else do we have in the API? I think we've got debug. I don't know if I want to expose debug, maybe. I just need to figure out a structure for that. So if we go look at the REST API, where's this? It's in server. Let's reload everything. Yeah. Okay, so we've got 1.0, so applications is covered, services is covered, system is covered, and then we've got debug log. So we might have a debug command. Debug is just a bit weird because it actually, it's not a straightforward get put type thing. So it would actually need a specific command for debug log. So it would be something kind of like that. And same thing with target. I'm putting target everywhere because if you're dealing with an IncusOS cluster, your remote is going to be the cluster, and then the target is the actual server within the cluster that you're going to be talking to. So that's kind of why that's there. Like for a standalone IncusOS, you're never going to use target, but if you're within a cluster, then that's how you would select a specific system to interact with. And I think that will basically cover everything. As you can see, it's designed to be as simple as possible. So just show, edit, list type things. We're not trying to do set or unset or any of those kind of things, because that would imply knowing the exact schema for the data. And I don't want to set any of that stuff in stone just yet. We're still making too many changes and additions and stuff. So it will be easier this way. Now to actually implement that, that's going to be a bunch of SPF 13 Cobra and copy pasting of stuff basically. But we can try and get the system section going, and then system like kind of more copy pasting to do applications and then services, and debug will be a bit weird. So that's the general idea. Now let's see the Incus CLI. What would be the closest equivalent to system show? So we need a command that's just doing effectively a get, and that supports setting a target. I mean, the main show command kind of does that, but it's also one of the weirdest of the bunch. I think storage show would be a good candidate actually. So let's go look at some of that. I was gonna just copy it, but that's gonna be unpleasant because the storage stuff is massive. And whatever, we're gonna still do it, and we're gonna just delete all of the file. It's fine. So incus, and then in here, say we do storage.go, and that becomes admin os.go. It's basically what we want here. And let's go and edit this guy. So manage, so this one turns into manage IncusOS. This should just be OS. Storage should be admin OS. Okay. Now storage column, I don't think we really need for now. Just ignore that. We want admin OS. It's got a target flag, so that's good. That's exactly what we want. Manage Incus OS systems. There we go. And this one actually needs kind of nested sections. So for now, we're gonna do system. So we want admin OS system command. Okay, this should be OS here, and then admin OS system command. Okay, so we can remove most of that stuff now. There. And effectively the next command, so the system command, is just another one of the same rough setup as this stop command. Oops. Okay, so this is the admin OS system command. The flag target is not needed because we're going to have the reference through to command admin OS that we can use for that. And then this one, admin OS system command, the command itself is there, manage IncusOS system configuration, something along those lines. And then this one is going to want two subcommands, so there's edit and show. just scrolled by accident. Share. System edit. System show. And yeah, the sub command just needs a reference back to the OS. It doesn't need anything else. Admin OS system edit command and show command. Okay, so that's fine. And then we said we wanted to structure that around the existing show and edit commands for that. So let's just delete everything except show and edit. Okay, we've got edit right here. So that's gonna turn into system edit. And usually we've got show right after edit. No, we've got get instead. Okay, fine. Info, where's show? List. Set. Show. There we go. Okay. So we want these two commands copy pasted from the existing storage stuff. And we don't really need any of the others, so we're just gonna delete the rest of the file. There we go. And now going back up a bunch, I'm gonna go and start messing with edit until it looks good. Command admin OS system edit. It needs to have a reference to OS, so command admin OS, yeah. Command admin OS system edit. We can probably do a replace for that one. Command admin OS system edit. Okay, now we do the same thing for show while we're at it. Okay. And then go back to looking at edit. So that's good, that's good. Edit. Right. So we want the remote. And then we want the, it's not really, the thing is like, it's not really a service. We'll just call it, I use section in the list down here. We'll use that terminology for now. I don't really love it, but we can come up with something better later. Edit specific configuration section. Let's do something like that. And this one just mentioned as YAML on top of it. Show specific configuration section of YAML. And then that's Incus admin OS system edit remote section of YAML update a IncusOS config section from the provided YAML file. Okay. The validation stuff should be fine. Well, actually, let's not do the completion stuff because that's completion implies that we have a stable API with on. So I'm just gonna skip completion. And then yeah, we're not gonna put a help template at this point because we don't know what's valid or not, and I don't want to have to keep constantly updating that stuff inside of the Incus code base. We're just not gonna do that. Quick checks. We want one argument. Is that correct? Yeah, that's correct. That's fine. We pass the servers if resource name is empty, missing section name. The config section name there. If studying is a terminal, read text from it. Yes, we should do that. Now the problem is we need we basically need to read it into a generic struct that we can store into anything. What's the best way to handle that? I don't remember how that works because like I don't think you can just put any and have it unpack in that. That's probably not gonna quite work. we've got like a JSON map thing that can handle that, I think, but there might be a generic type that can also handle that kind of stuff. Anyway, I know we've got a thing called JSON map. No, not that. JMap. Yeah, internal JMap, which we can then unpack into, and I think that supports nested stuff. But is there something more generic in Go for that now? So I'm gonna look for Go unmarshal arbitrary JSON. Like, is there a type we can use? Yeah, they're using like map string interface or something, which I guess kind of works, maybe. I mean, that implies that you're dealing with a key value map at the top level, which, I mean, we are, so that might be okay. I'm kind of tempted to try any. Like someone was actually mentioning online that they just used any and that worked. Yeah, I'm not convinced, but let's try it. So what are new data, any, and then that will effectively parse that, and then we need to push it back to the server. We obviously can't really use those function calls. We're not gonna. We're just gonna use the generic function call that we get instead. So actually, for in this case, for the case of just reading from stdin and shooting it to the server, we can make it much simpler than that. We can literally just transfer the thing. So let me actually wipe that logic completely, and we're just gonna do a forward stdin to server, because we will literally just take the data and ship it as is to the server in the post call and in the put call. So that's fine. It's not, we don't need to do anything weird. Now here is where we actually need to get the data and then marshal it into an arbitrary JSON, arbitrary YAML. So we're getting JSON data from the API. We're gonna need to unmarshal that and then get it back to the user to edit. Like right now, it's gonna just want the skeleton of the command to function, even if there's no actual data. So data here is what we would want to show to the user. So I'm just gonna do this, remove that, and then we'll do the logic to fill that in later. We said no help template, so we can remove that part here, which just turns into that. That's fine. And then we try to parse it normally, and before we send it to the back to the server. That is not really a thing here. But well, I mean, the unmarshal will be actually. It's just that this one is unmarshal to any. And then if successful, that's where we would do an update. Okay, and that could still fail, but yeah, effectively we'll do it here. And then we've got show. So show, let's do same thing here. Oops. OS, that flag should not exist here. Show remote section. that's why you actually want to line it up mostly with the help from edit and just use the same terminology. So there. Something like that. Show specific configuration section. The resources flag should not exist. That can go away. It's fine. This one should be unpacked into os.flag target. I don't know if I did that above. Was edit. Edit didn't have the flag. Really? Yeah, it didn't. Okay, well, it needs to have the flag. Like that. And the validation function, that needs to go away. So that means the logic to handle the target was probably missing then. Yep, here. The resources stuff doesn't matter. So I can remove that. Okay. If we go back to edit, let's do it there, I guess. OS flag target, client, use target, flag target. Go. Use target member if specified. Let's just do that. Okay, as same as the above. This is on OS. Okay, we don't have that logic yet with all of the sorting and stuff. What we just do is let's set data to do. Okay, so that's most of the structure done. Now let's see how broken the code is. It's gonna be pretty broken for sure. Okay, IO is imported, doesn't need to be imported, and we're gonna bunch of declared not used stuff. Oh yeah, okay, I put a typo. Oh yeah, okay, I really typoed this thing, okay. Okay, fix that typo. Let's remove the import and see. Okay, more imports removed. Maps, URL, reflect, sorts, string conf, strings. Okay, reflect, string conf, strings. Did we? Yes, sorts can go away too. Share the API. Yeah, we're not using that. Probably not using units either, but let's see. Yeah, units can go away too. Okay. Line 56, unhappy. Why are you unhappy? Cannot use variable of type as command admin OS value. Right, so I guess we probably, what we actually want is .os, this. Does that fix it? Yeah. So just passing through its OS. There we go. And we don't have a client. Okay, what did I mess up here? All right, okay, we do that here. What did I do with DRM? It's because when I did, when I saved the file earlier, I did this by accident. So I did save into a file named \. So that's why I just removed it. So it was just me making a typo and then immediately fixing it. Okay, so this is actually building, which is good. Now it's not actually added to our CLI, so I still need to fix that. Incus admin.go. So we need to add the OS subcommand to that mix. Looks like it's gonna go here. So OS admin admin OS, admin OS, admin OS. That should do that. Yep. Just cleaning things up. Okay. So now I should be able to do admin OS. There we go. Available commands, admin OS system. Admin OS system shows available commands, edit and show. If I do show, I need to specify a section. So in my case, I would actually go to the remote server, IncusOS, and then I would want to show, say, storage. And it just says to do. So that's good. The general structure is in place. Now we need to do some plumbing for the API itself. So let's try and get show working first, because that's the easy case. And then if that works, we can reuse it for the other one. So if I go look at show and look for the to-do value, which is here, we need that to actually do something useful. So it needs to hit the API. It needs to grab the, like do the API call, grab the JSON, convert the JSON to YAML effectively. So we'll just unmarshal and marshal it back, if that makes sense. And that should be it. To do that, we're not gonna be able to do, I guess we don't have an API call in here that can really do that. So we just need to kind of do it by hand. So if we're looking at things like use storage pool, the get storage pool function, what it actually does internally is it uses a thing called query struct to then query and unpack into specific struct. I don't believe we expose query struct externally, so we can't just use that. But query struct internally does a query call, which query call does a raw query, and raw query, oops. Where's raw query? Yeah, raw query is here. So there's actually an exposed version of that which we can use, which is called raw query, like that, and we can then unpack things from there. This will get us an API response, which is not exactly what we want. Actually, no, it's fine. That's what we want. And then we need to turn that into, get the metadata section of that and then unpack it. So let's try that. I'm just going to remember what handles the target flag, because we need to set that, and I don't remember what does. How does that work again? So if we put target in here. Okay, there's a set URL query attributes, which is not exposed externally, which does that stuff. So we might have to do it ourselves, unless that function is somehow called what we want it. Okay, so there are two things: the set query attribute, set URL query attributes, and then set query attributes. Let's see where they're used. So this guy directly used on a couple of endpoints, but I guess generally this one is the one that's more widely used. Yep. And is it used as part of, it's used as part of query, but it's not going to be used as part of the exported raw query. So we're going to have to handle it ourselves, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, okay, that's fine. So let's go back to this file and can I put our things back together? So this is pointless, effectively, that's what that means. What we need to do is, let me find the signature again for raw query. Okay, raw query wants a method, a path, and then the data, some data in, which is nothing, e tag, which is going to be nothing, and then it returns an API string error. Okay, so So URL path for what we want is /os/1.0/system, and then the section. And the section is arg0, something like that. Then what we actually want to do is if the OS flag target is not empty, we're gonna go and just URL path, append to that, target equals URL path, target equals COS flag target. Like there's nothing particularly weird in like the section names and stuff the user's gonna provide, so we can get away with that just fine given our API. If there were more complex things like projects and whatnot in the path, that'd be a bad idea, but for what we're doing, that should be fine. This one is incorrect, so it should be config section name here. Okay, so that basically sets up the URL that we need to hit, and then we can do the output is response etag error. So response we care about, etag we don't care about, error we care about, and it's client. I mean, at this point we don't use the client much, so we can just do this and get rid of that temporary variable here. It's not useful anymore. Resource.server.raw query. The method is get. The path is this. There is no data. There's no etag. Okay. So if we get an error at this point, we return the error. And then if we don't, we effectively have the data here, and we need to do. So we're getting an API response back from the type I remember. And then, so that's what an API response looks like. We can get the metadata as just a basic map. That's not really what we want. We don't want it as an operation. We don't want it as a string slice. We want it as a struct. So that will get us the raw kind of value for it. So I actually want, I forgot the signature already. Just target. So we want response dot this and then write into data like that. And pack metadata. And then, so at this point, that should get us some, just a Go struct that matches the JSON data, hopefully. And then lastly, we need to turn that back into YAML. So that's where we're going to be doing data error YAML dot marshal of data, something like that. I really managed to do, okay, so data is not gonna work because that's a string now, so data string, okay, something like that. I'm really not convinced by the anything working, but let's see. So Incus admin system show, Incus storage, not found. What did it do? Okay. /os/1.0, that's fine, /system, and then /IncusOS storage. Well, that's wrong. Oh, I know why. It's not supposed to be arg0. Yeah, it's supposed to be the resource, so resource.name. The rest seemed good, at least the API and URL endpoint and everything was fine, so that's good. Okay, that's kind of what I expected. So we did the get to the right endpoint. If I do a normal query to it, that's what we would get. And that didn't unpack correctly because this went fine, this not so much. Let's try the alternative, which is a map string any. Oh, there's another thing, which is this, maybe? Oh yeah, okay. Cool. So it actually does work with any, yeah, so long as I'm not messing up my pointers. Cool. So that does show config state, the different entries as YAML. Sweet. Okay, now to make edit work then. And yeah, let's try another endpoint with the network, for example. There we go. That's the network one as YAML. You'll notice it's not like particularly fancy or anything. It just literally takes the JSON, lets you modify it. That's it. We don't get comments. We don't get any niceties, but it works. And that's basically all we want. So that's good. And now, again, we're gonna do the exact same thing in edit. So I kind of want that logic here. That's what I need for up there. And still gonna ignore the reading from YAML thing for now. So URL path should go here. The general syntax is all fine for that, so we can remove this guy. We don't need the client anymore, so that can go away. And then, so that's the current value, get current value. Yeah, and then this is data string instead, which should, does that build? If it builds, it should at least let me start the editor. It won't be able to actually edit anything, but that works. And then if I save, to do, send to server. Yep. Okay, so we're getting to this point here, which is good. Now, like the parsing will always succeed realistically. So I think what we kind of want actually here is this should be just resetting the error, kind of like that. So that if the server fails, we also get to try again. Okay. We unmarshal the data and then we send it. Okay, so at this point we will have new data set to the right thing, and then we need to send that to the server. Let me check what raw query does with that. So if I go here, raw query, I want to know what it does with the data, specifically the data field. So data here is still any. If data is not null, it checks what it is, and then it does a JSON automatically on that. Cool. So we don't need to handle that part ourselves. That's nice. Which means I should be able to, so if I take my query again, the raw query here, and I go here, no response, no, well, yeah, I don't really care about the response from the server at that point. It's just I want to do a put to the URL with the provided data, so it's new data here. So we just want that, yeah, like that. Something like this. Does that even build? Looks like it does. Cool. Okay, so if we do edit network, and so that's the config right now, and then DNS and host name is full. Okay, config passing error, JSON unsupported type, map interface, interface something. Cool. Okay, what layer is that failing? So it looks like we went from here, we send the data, so new data is fine because we're not doing any JSON stuff here. That's then going into here with that raw query thing here, which goes here, and then we're in the data is not null case. The data is not an IO reader. Instead, it's JSON, so it would go down here. The encoder then takes the data and apparently failed right there. Is that what's going on? Seems likely. I don't think we ever hit the network. Let's run it in debug mode, but I don't think we ever hit the network. No, actually we did. See, you're sending request to Incus. Put config passing error, JSON and supported type. Are we logging that? Where is that message being logged? Maybe it's just a log time thing here. This guy. Yeah, okay. We log right after. Okay. So that is the issue, we're failing in that spot. Okay, let's just close this guy and try the alternative. So the alternative I saw was don't make it any, make it map string any, which still matches our general API structure. So that's fine. Let's try that. I was pretty sure that anything was gonna come to bite us, and it did. DNS hostname foo. Still the same thing, really. And it says like unsupported type map interface, but that's not what we have. Okay. I did rebuild the command, so that wasn't the issue. I'm just gonna want to see a dump of what it is that we actually have at this point, just in case there's some issue with the data itself. Let's try that. Okay. Yeah, too much debugging. Hold on. Let's start off the debug. There we go. So we've got a map config to map interfaces, map address. Okay, what's the problem with that? Like, there's nothing in there that's fundamentally problematic as far as types. That's kind of confusing. Yeah, I'm kind of tempted to just do our own JSON thing here. What's the new encoder syntax? I never remember that. No. JSON new encoder body thing. Okay. So something along those lines. Let's try that. Yeah. So what we would want is to encode into a buffer of some kind. Like it finds an IO reader, but there's is it bytes new writer, I think, something like that we can do. not here, here, yeah. I think it's something along those lines. Because we basically want to get from that struct to a new, I mean, check the doc for JSON, because I want effectively a reader that I can just pass through. Do we have anything that looks like that in there? Not really. I mean, let's just try something simpler, I guess. JSON Marshall of the data, so new data, like that. I just want to see what JSON actually does, because like the YAML stuff has no problem with it, and I don't see why JSON would. Let's just try that. Printing the JSON data, and then just passing it right with this guy. Okay, I'm missing the JSON encoder, encoding JSON, that. And then if we edit this guy, JSON unsupported type map interface. Okay, but again, that is not what we're dealing with. It's kind of frustrating. Oh, I mean, in this case, it's kind of my fault. No, it's not actually. Never mind. And see the different type, I expect we're gonna get the exact same error. Yeah, at least it's consistent. Just checking if there's a more generic way that should work. Like part of the issue is that it's expecting us, it's saying a struct, and with structs, it's expecting things to be, all the fields to be capitalized and stuff, but it actually work. That's, I think, where the JMap stuff we have might fix that somehow. Git grab. Yeah. Don't know if that's gonna help, but we might as well give it a try. Because otherwise we're gonna need custom marshallers and unmarshallers to just get this thing going, which is kind of data. Okay. So where's the edit? It's here, just some data. So let's try to unmarshal that into a JMap. So and then see what JSON does with that. No idea what that's gonna do, but let's see. That type has been around for a long time. Okay, exact same error, so that's always great. Didn't print anything though. don't get it. Oh, yeah, okay, that doesn't help. New data into Gmap, and yeah, so it means it still can't process the that Gmap thing. Not sure why. I thought it was literally designed for that, but apparently not. It's kind of annoying that the YAML stuff handles it just fine and JSON does not. You'd think at least like everything I see is like a use map string interface and that works. That's map string any in current logic, and no, it doesn't work. It got the exact same error. But a lot of that is around unmarshal, and sure, yeah, unmarshal, that's fine. We've got the show command working. It's pushing the data. That's the problem. Let's actually look up the error itself. Unsupported type. I also don't know what would be unsupported in the data. Like, there's nothing weird in that endpoint. So but there's an intermediary storage thing we might be able to use. I'm trying to remember how that stuff works. Shared API. There's a JSON thing in there somewhere. Don't want any of those guys. It's kind of like in the network ACL case, maybe? Is that where we've got some of that weirdness? Not really. Okay, let's just ignore all the JSON current thing there. Not really. I'm not seeing what I want in there yet. Yeah, JSON raw message. That's what I wanted to see. Can we unpack to that somehow? What's that type doing exactly in life? Raw. So otherwise I'm gonna have to do a bunch of research after the stream. Raw message, raw encoded JSON value. It implements marshmallow and marshmallow and can be used to delay JSON decoding and pre-compute. Pre-compute. Sorry. Can be used to delay JSON decoding and pre-compute JSON encoding. So that might be interesting here. If we can turn the YAML into that somehow, does that work? So that's fine. And then this type here, let's see if we can make that a JSON dot raw message. If it is, then that should encode fine, presumably. Something like that. I've never used this thing much. We use it in our API, but I'm not the one who put that in place. I'm not completely sure how that works. Let's try that. If not, I'm gonna have to do some research and figure this stuff out afterwards. Cannot unmarshal. Okay, so this time it's YAML that says it can't unmarshal into that thing. Doesn't really tell us why. It just says it can't. Let's see if anyone did straight up YAML to JSON conversion stuff. Like there's some packages that can do it. I just rather not. Okay. Yeah, there's some folks, what they're doing is they're effectively letting YAML convert to a map string any, and then iterate through it, and for everything they see, convert it to a map string interface. So that would work. There's also something in Kubernetes' YAML package that supposedly does straight up YAML to JSON. But yeah, I'm gonna have to do a bit more research around that. Sorry. At least we do have the role structure working. So just as a reminder here, we've got the OS command that shows the system command. System then has edit and show. Show does actually work, so we can do system show storage of the right server, and that works correctly. So I was just getting edit working, and then once that does, effectively copy paste it for the remaining commands, creating that structure, and then we'll have something that we can make use of for IncusOS and not have to use Incus query constantly. So that's the idea. I'm sorry, I got a bit down a rabbit hole here with YAML to JSON conversion. It was going very well up until that point. And I see a few pointers that show how that can be done, either manually by converting the types or potentially reusing the same logic that Kubernetes' YAML package has. We also at some point need to replace our YAML parser anyways within the Incus project. We started doing that in some other corners. Once we do, that we would probably get that command for free. But there's a bunch of other weirdness with switching YAML handler within Incus that made us not do it yet. The reason for wanting to move YAML parser is because the current one is no longer supported. So the standard Go YAML thing is effectively unmaintained now. So we're looking at transitioning to something else. But I don't want to have this feature be blocked on that. So I'm gonna just find a way around it, potentially with just a loop doing that kind of rewrite from map any to map string any, and kind of fixing the structure that way. Realistically for us, it's because we just have one level of nested structs that's then causing that issue. So it might be easy enough to just convert them and call it done. Anyways, I'll get that going. If you keep an eye on the repo, you'll probably see a pull request against the Incus repo in the coming days that will sort that out. And then we can look at something else in the next live stream. Thanks a lot for everyone for watching. If you've got any questions around this work, IncusOS, Incus itself, any of that stuff, feel free to leave them down below in the comment section, or you can go on the community forum where we're always around to help you. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. It's gonna be no more live stream next week. Bye, folks.